food or something. I'll work, but anything. Oh, all right. Here's some paint. I'll go around back and paint the porch, and I'll pay you well. And I'll have some food ready for you too. The fellow looks down and says, that's not very good looking paint. I don't know, it's kind of ugly paint. Okay, yeah, I'll do whatever you want. It goes back around. Comes back in a while, knocks on the door. He says, okay, all done. Oh, I still think that's kind of questionable paint. And, oh, by the way, that's not a Porsche, that's a Maserati. That's a groaning joke about something going terribly wrong. I don't know if the guy ever got his car repainted, but the phoenix rises again. You know the story. This mythical bird lives 500 years. There's only one at a time. And when it has run its course, it bursts into flame, spontaneous combustion. But that is not the end of the story. Out of the ashes comes the new phoenix to live another 500 years. We know this. You don't know it as a young person. You don't know that you get through things. We know this. The way we learned it is by getting through things. And sometimes, if we're not too attached to the old, the new thing is okay. The new thing is better. And maybe we're a little stronger and wiser for having gone through this experience. For today's sermon, I want to revisit a few of the stories. Been preaching for you for a year now, and maybe you noticed that a lot of the stories are about getting through things because I think that's what's going on here. And the stories are encouraging. The stories are not tragic. There's a happy ending. The middle part's kind of rough. Anne of Green Gables is a story about an orphan. Well, you don't have to have lost your parents at a young age to know that orphan feeling. That's a universal, that's an archetype. That's feeling lost in the world. We all get our share. She had bad luck as a foster child, was put out to several families that were kind of overbearing and maybe even abusive. Finally, somebody wants her, and she goes with great hope, only to discover they were hoping for a boy. It's a farm, they were not going to work the kid that hard, but they were hoping for some help in exchange for shelter and family and so forth. And so here early in the story, she's going to go back to the orphan asylum in the faraway city where things are bleak. That's not the end of the story. That's the part she has to get through. She is actually very imaginative. She is able to see in the natural surroundings wonder and beauty where they were just the trees and just the field and just the pond to everyone else. After they meet Anne Shirley, after she describes them through her eyes, they are never the same again, and she endears herself. And she solves problems with relationships, and there are little mishaps. You need mishaps for a story. In the end, she has a strong community and a home, a family, a place she belongs. She survives. Guy goes into a restaurant and says, "Do you serve crabs here?" And the waiter comes over and says, "Oh, yes. Oh, yes, we serve everybody." Yeah, some of these I have to wait for. Jonah, you know the story of Jonah. A big fish. Well, first of all, Jonah is trying to get out of his job. He has a calling. There is something he's supposed to do. He does all that he can think of to get out of it. This is the part of ourselves that would like to avoid trouble, avoid difficulty, avoid hard work. There is an inner slacker in all of us. The inner slacker, in my humble opinion, is not really lazy, more afraid. Doesn't think that the task is doable, or those moments when we don't feel we're up to life's challenges. And for a while at least, go numb, turn the TV on, whatever you do to space out and not deal with things. Well, it just gets worse and worse until he's in the belly of a great fish. And I know the kids in Hebrew school are talking about, and is he getting bleached? Anyway, that is not the end of the story. Apparently, he gave the great fish a terrible case of indigestion. He gets barfed out, and this is the part, I remember in Sunday school, I like that part. You seldom get stories that are really kind of gnarly, but small boys like these things. And what does he finally do? Finally, he goes and does what he was supposed to do in the first place, and it goes very well. He goes on to great success. Part of his problem was he didn't like that city where he was sent to preach. Nineveh, largest city on the planet at that time, and considered sinful. Maybe think of it as Las Vegas. It's the place that people go to cause trouble. What happens in Nineveh stays in Nineveh, the old saying. Anyway, he has to change his perspective. He has to say, these people are worth helping. This is his own social work project, and it goes okay. It goes okay. In a trip to Bountiful, Mrs. Carrie Watts is an older woman living with her son and his wife, and she sweeps up, prepares some of the food, and gets picked on by the daughter-in-law, played by Vanessa Williams there. It's Cecily Tyson plays Mrs. Watts, and she's forever being corrected. She likes to sing hymns while she does her work. She's a person of faith, and her daughter-in-law, who likes pop music and movies, and her idea of a good time is to dress up and go down to the soda fountain and have a Coke with her friends. They're kind of poor. They don't have money to go out for lunch. She can go out for a Coke, but she likes to put on airs, whereas the mother-in-law, Mrs. Carrie Watts, wants to sing her hymns and longs to revisit the place she lived her best years, the little crossroads of Bountiful, Texas, where she raised her son, who is now married to the daughter-in-law. Well, they don't have time. They're busy. It's a long trip. They don't even entertain the notion of indulging this longing. And so finally, Mrs. Watts takes her Social Security check, takes off, and goes to Bountiful. She's very kind. She's kind to the people on the bus. She's kind to the bus driver. She's kind to the person who sells the tickets. And they take to her and they help her. There are times when we need the help of others. She ends up causing a whole community. In a way, a little like Anne of Green Gables pulled her whole little town together through her interaction. It's important to have community. Day may come when you need to organize, because individual action on good causes is a good thing, but doesn't get very far. It's collective action that matters, and all the people in the story help Mrs. Watts get to Bountiful. Think of the metaphor. This is all metaphor, folks. We're not taking a bird on fire literally. If Phoenix, Arizona burned to the ground, it would not rise from the ashes the next day. This is a story. And Bountiful is the metaphor of abundance, and it's a poor, broken down place. And she finds the house, and it's vacant. It's not been lived in for a long time. Okay, this is about not being too attached to our past, not trying to go back to the good old days. They weren't as good as we remember them, and they're gone anyway. These are the good old days. But she does find something. She doesn't find the Bountiful where she raised her boy, Ludi. She finds herself, the person she had been, the person with hope and imagination, the lively person who enjoyed nature. And her son finally shows up to take her back to Houston. And she points out, remember that bird and that one? We used to come out and watch them when you were a little boy. And you remember this and remember that. It all comes back. Yes, something can be reclaimed, a part of ourselves that we lost track of. So her yearning for belonging is served. This joke, I'm going to blame Wilma for sending it to me. I like it, but if you like the joke, thank me. If you don't like the joke, go talk to Wilma. What do you call cheese that does not belong to you? Nacho cheese. No, I liked it. Thank you, Wilma, for thinking of me. People know that I like horrible jokes, and they send them to me, and I do feel honored. I feel loved. In the classic movie, It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is considering suicide. He's out on the bridge over the very fast-moving river. It's the middle of winter. Anybody who jumps into that water is not long for this world. What has gone so wrong? Well, his uncle and business partner managed to lose a substantial amount of money. There is the real possibility of scandal. There is the possibility of jail. Things have gone very, very south. That is not the end of the story. The Firebird will rise. The neighbors, the townsfolk, the bank customers bring money. It's covered. He's released. Why did they do that? Because his life has been a social work project from the time he was a boy. He has been out helping people, seeing people in need, giving them out of his pocket at times when they were in trouble. He has leveraged that little business he's got to bring a small development into being that allows people to own homes for the first time. His whole life has been giving. And in the end, you're worth what you've given away. The phoenix rises, and he has, well, you know, he forgot who he was. He forgot the impact he had had on others. And the last story I'll touch on is the one I spoke on recently, Barbie, the movie Barbie. Here is a story of somebody who's happy. Life is going well, until she says, do any of you have thoughts of dying? None of them do. And she quickly recovers by saying, well, I'm just dying to dance, and tries to get back into the mood, but it came through. Well, it came through, you know the story, you saw the movie, from another dimension, from another reality that lies behind this one where everything is happy. That is the fullness of life, the rest of our emotions besides dance fever. And then a moral choice comes up in the narrative, whether to stay in the illusion, stay in the superficial life of feeling good and looking good and having a good time, or to be a complete human being, to have all these other feelings, including sorrow, including fear, all this other stuff that isn't as much fun but is deep, it is profound, and she chooses well. She goes beyond the stereotypical role she has been living on and chooses authenticity. She embraces imperfection. She also takes control of her own narrative, because this superficial life has a dynamic of its own, and it'll carry us if we choose to live there. That is to suggest, and this is the mystical part of the sermon here, that there is a deeper reality. There is a fuller humanity available to us. It is what the mystics call illumination. And you don't have to be a mystic to have touched it, for it to come into your life. And sometimes it comes as sorrow, sometimes it comes as fear, sometimes it comes as ecstasy. And then it has a dynamic. Then it will take you places that are not entirely of your choosing, that are more wonderful than you might imagine. I notice in the story that there's a good deal of awareness of intersectionality, different kinds of people. It's actually Weird Barbie that kind of has the wisdom to show the protagonist how to proceed. As we embrace diversity externally and internally, we get that larger possibility of fulfillment. So how do we find renewal in the face of wrenching loss? After all, loss keeps happening. If you stick around, aging has waves of loss in it. And if we look at it as total misfortune, we'll grow very, very bitter. If we look at it as a grand adventure, as part of the texture of our fullness, then we can actually see a kind of beauty in it. The Sufi mystic Rumi appreciated darkness. In the blackest of your moment, wait with no fear. Life's waters flow from darkness. Search the darkness. Don't run from it. Fertile soil is dark. From that, life comes. Grief is vital and necessary. It is not simply something to be endured. It has its own beauty. It's messy. It doesn't serve our control fantasies, which have been rather oversold in this culture. We can do with less. I'm not saying we should be out of control all the time, but we could take breaks. There is the possibility of something that would come to us better than what we would plan. Right at the moment our hearts break, maybe we can find our way through to something more. Atonement is an idea in theology. The word in psychology is integration, that there is a kind of magical totality that is greater than the sum of its parts. In religious language, it is coming to grips with your God. It is integrating somehow with the sacred, finding a way to talk to the angels. But we don't have to use that theological language to know there is a radiance to life that is sometimes missing that would be good to reconnect with. This is the stage of reconciliation. The dark night of the soul is not the end point in those stories I touched on. It's the middle. Then there is the return. Then we come back to the world and make our peace with it. And it might not be the world we wanted. It is the world it is. This is coming to terms with reality. It's the reality of who we are at what stage of life with whatever gifts and flaws. It is the reality of the world not being quite as perfect as we'd like it to be. And maybe pick our shots in terms of how much we're going to complain about it. Some complaining is useful. Some complaining is social action, make the world a better place. But we're going to have to start here on its terms. That is, you have to come to terms with reality if you're going to go anywhere. The action steps, well, Anne Shirley makes peace with people. Good plan. Jonah changes his mind. A change of perspective might reveal a better plan than the one we came up with. There are times to be suspicious of our own certainty. In the trip to Bountiful, revisiting a long-standing dream might yield surprising results. Simultaneously, it could allow some release of a certain perspective, a certain way of seeing something, and a claiming of a part of ourselves that got lost along the way. Mrs. Watts is certainly tenacious. Think of something you have wanted to do and never got to. Think of some project, some learning, some trip, some phone call. See if there isn't some way to do it. See if you can't get to it sooner than later. Be open to a revision. It might not be the exact thing that you've been thinking of. Instead of a visit to Illinois, maybe it's a phone call to Illinois, but go back to that nagging feeling and see if there's any action that would help. From George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, consider making a list of how you have mattered. None of us have done all the things we hope to. None of us have done all the good we hope to do, but we've done some. This is the glass half full exercise. Give yourself some credit for the effect you have had. Your treasure is in what you gave away. And in Barbie, well, claiming the whole range of your emotional life is worth something. The messy parts are part of the big picture. Try to remember the setbacks you have survived. We've all had quite a list. You can make a list. The point of the list is not, oh, poor me, all these bad things have happened. The point of the list is, wow, look, I got through this, and I got through that, and I'm still here. That one, where you give yourself some credit. What have you learned from loss? And then, what longing is asking for your attention now? What would be renewed in you if you paid more attention to that which calls you? Namaste. Blessed be. And so it goes.